Welcome to the Creator Tutorials podcast. Really excited we got on SJ today. SJ, would you give yourself an introduction?
It would be my pleasure. Thank you, Alex. My name is SJ, and I consider myself a futurepreneur. I'm at the intersection of the future of work and the future of education. I believe both of these have a lot of exciting trends. They intersect often, and it's a pleasure to be able to serve people, to help solve issues and challenges, and share quality information in this space.
SJ, give me an understanding here. What is the future of work? I mean, what was work like in a general sense? Like, how were we doing things? And then how has it kind of changed and evolved? And we can kind of start the conversation there.
Absolutely. A lot of different ways you can tack this question and unpack it, if you will. So here's one way. There was an industrial revolution that led to two back-to-back industrial ages. The one that's the most well-known is the blue-collar work. Everyone went to a factory, they punched in and out, they went home, they worked 30 years, they got their pension, they retired. But the little-known one after that is the corporate or white-collar industrial age. That's where you did something very similar, but in this case, you went to work for a multinational, a global conglomerate. You got a piece of paper known as a degree or a bunch of certifications. In this case, you usually went to an office building. You did a lot of the same things that I just said about the blue collar. You punched in and out. You got paid every couple of weeks. You went home and you probably retired and you had benefits while you were there. That's the old way. Does that still exist in the world of late 2023 as we record? Yes, it does. However, it's fading and it's going to continue to fade in my view. The future of work is a lot of different things, and here's a couple quick examples. First, you can now work from pretty much anywhere with a solid, stable internet connection. Hotspots, solid Wi-Fi, 5G networks, the whole bit. Second is if you do have to work in a central location, restaurants, hotels, etc., warehouses, you can do asynchronous work where you can have people come in on different kind of shifts. They might come in for 4 hours, leave, and come back for 4 more hours, or 4-day weeks, or things of that nature. You also have situations where businesses are distributed and conventional hierarchies no longer exist. That's expressed through DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, holacracies, and other such structures that do not have conventional hierarchy, which is millennia old. So, in short, things are a lot less centralized. They are decentralized now. There's a lot more options. And if you are in a situation where you have this return to office stuff being discussed, you don't necessarily have to fall in line anymore. You can push back or you can say, you know what, I'm moving on because you know what, you're not giving me the flexibility that I need to live my life instead of to live for working.
Yeah, you mentioned some interesting terms there. I think a lot of people are entering into a solopreneur space. They're becoming an online entrepreneur. They're selling courses. They're posting on social media. They're be a coach or a consultant, and the rise of the gig economy as well. And so talk to me a little bit about that, SJ. Corporate America is changing, obviously, but this new kind of solopreneur or home-based business, this is the new phenomenon too. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So almost in parallel to everything I just described, you have these, I guess we'll call them sub-economies, rising and rising fast. One of them is the gig economy. And don't be fooled by a lot of the negativity out there when you're listening or watching this. Yes, the gig economy has its challenges. Anything that involves humanity does because humans are imperfect. However, there's a lot of great things happening in the gig economy. And I would make a very good case that during the darkest days of the COVID era, the gig economy kept some people above water, because they were able to do things that allowed them to bring in income even with lockdowns and such in place. So you have the gig economy, and then you also have the creator economy. People can now create content that is meant to add value to the marketplace. It's on their terms, oftentimes solo proprietor, solopreneur, one-person businesses. The vast majority of businesses out there, through most statistics that I've seen, are one person. They can be called lifestyle businesses where they're not meant to scale and be a conventional startup. And those are the ones that get all the press, right? The ones that grow from 1 person to 100 in a year or two. Nothing wrong with that. If that's a type of business you have or someone you know, you should applaud them. But it's the one-person lifestyle businesses creating, offering professional services, monetizing knowledge in the head that's where we're going. And it's a really exciting thing as part of this future work.
And what other trends? I mean, we talked about kind of the rise of the solopreneur, the change in corporate America, working from home, but what other trends are you seeing in this future of work, for future of education space?
A big one is untapped talent pools, especially if it's the corporate side, but it also can affect you as a smaller business if you choose to scale past yourself. And that is, these untapped talent pools oftentimes have been held back in the white-collar industrial age by the lack of pieces of paper known as credentials, which were offering degree signaling. It was credentialism. It really wasn't higher ed. It was HIRE ed instead of HIGHER. It was meant to be a signal that you were supposedly employable. That is starting to fade away in almost every part of society, with the one exception, unsurprisingly, being academia. Because academia, of course, that's their bread and butter, is their product is providing credentials. But even there, they're having to face a reckoning because of the demographic cliff and other such things. So that's the first thing, is these untapped talent pools. If you are hiring, you should look at skills, proof of work over proof of paper, which is that degree signal, that credentialism. Let people be mapped into your workplace based upon the skills that they have or the skills that you can up or reskill them on, rather than them saying, here's my piece of paper, here's my resume, here's my cover letter, and now you can put me through this gauntlet, which is almost like the equivalent of a sausage factory, where most of the time the person is out there for months wondering, do you want me or not? We got to move past that. That's a big trend. Another trend is, and I sort of hit it earlier, is asynchronous work, where you can do 4 days a week. You can do blocks of time where you disappear for a little while, take care of your family, and come back and work. This can be done at a physical space just as well as from working remote. There are also trends going on right now with digital badging, where you do just-in-time learning rather than seat time. So it's competency-based instead of investing time in an uncertain outcome. You get the badge, you get the micro nano credential, and then you can progress further onwards in your chosen career path.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And a lot of people are nervous about this kind of new future of work. There's a lot less job security. People are changing jobs more. They're moving more. There's a lot of pessimism about it. Are you pessimistic about this change, or optimistic? And if so, why so?
I am optimistic with an anchor in the fact that realism needs to be a part of it. You can't be blind to the fact that there's going to be some rough edges. Anytime we've had transformation, example from the agricultural to the blue-collar industrial, that was a major, major change, and there were definitely a lot of rough edges. All you got to do is review Upton Sinclair's work and a few other people from the turn of the 19th to the 20th century. So absolutely, there are some rough edges in this 21st century transition from the white-collar industrial to the gig creator independent workforce. So generally speaking, I am optimistic. Where I am realistic is that A, I know not everyone will be able to experience the fruits immediately. B, there are going to be some industries hit harder than others. And this is where entrepreneurs can step in and say, you know what, we have better models than the existing. And Buckminster Fuller has been one of my biggest influences in this area. He says, you know what, if an existing model is not working, you lead it towards its obsolescence by creating better models that people can choose in the open marketplace. So you don't attempt to reform from the top down a model that just simply cannot work anymore for the existing age. So that is why I am more optimistic. But I am also telling your audience, Alex, that it's not going to be perfect. There's going to be some issues here and there. No system of governance on the surface of Earth has ever been perfect. Yes, there are certain people that are more fearful because capitalism, for example, has been corrupted by certain elements. But I can also make a case that other forms of governance throughout human history have been a lot less valuable than capitalism. So I'm not blindly in favor of capitalism. I tend to prefer the terminology of free enterprise. People who are enterprising and are offering solutions to problems they're taking opportunities to improve things, they should be rewarded as having created value and helped deal with the bad. They're the ones who will lead the way and will help us get through this. So generally speaking, again, I'm an optimist with a little bit of grounding in the fact that history tells us there will be some disruption.
How would you recommend people prepare for this uncertain future, right? We hear that AI is going to put us all out of a job, and we hear from other people that AI is going to bring abundance, and we're all going to be living in this hyper abundant future world. And I think there's a lot of skepticism around there, or there's not a lot of understanding of how that will be possible in our current monetary system, especially with inflation. I mean, things are getting so much more expensive, wages aren't rising, and so people are leaning into this gig, creator, independent solopreneur economy to make more money. But then there's a lot of issues and struggles there too, right? It's not as easy as maybe just going and applying at the job down the street. So how do people prepare or deal with this new future?
Well, first of all, I appreciate how you're being very authentic and very real with the audience, as I am as well with your audience. Because here's the thing. There are very real challenges right now. And let's just pick one of the trends. You mentioned AI because that's the one that gets the most press right now. The oxygen in the room tends to migrate there. So you can't ignore the elephant. So a brief comment there is I believe the true future of AI's impact is going to be somewhere in the middle of the extremes. Not a ton of people are going to go and disappear and not have a way to make a living. Just like when people were predicting that certain large metros like London and New York City were going to be overrun. And I know this sounds a little bit crude, but they were going to be overrun by manure because of horses. That was predicted by certain people who were a little bit more black pillars or doomsayers. But guess what? As soon as the motorized carriage came along, 500,000 different people or different entities started to produce these vehicles. And the manure issue disappeared over time. Now, again, did the motorized carriage, soon to be known as an automobile, did it have its own challenges? Of course it did. However, everything goes through a process of going forward where it's not about perfection. It's about making headway and getting better. Case in point, we can talk about internet access. I'm old enough to remember, I don't know about the rest of your audience, Alex, but I'm old enough to remember when the internet was very stop and start. It was almost like Max Headroom. If you know that name, look it up if you don't, where it was like, well, guess what? Here we are recording now, and it's a whole heck of a lot better. So that's my answer for AI. It's going to be somewhere in the middle. There's going to be displacement, but there's also going to be a lot of new opportunities created because if you can free people from a lot of the mundane work, menial effort, that's a huge thing. Just like I'm a big fan of deploying blockchain. Blockchain is going to take stacks of paper and make it obsolete. And a lot of these third parties, they may not have a conventional job anymore, but there will be new ways to deploy their skills rather than doing stuff that can be done by a blockchain decentralized network, which has pure visibility and transparency, so eliminates opaqueness. Just like AI can do stuff where it's like, man, I have to do something that I really don't like, but they're paying me for it. So the first thing in summary then is number one for preparation is open your mind to possibility. Second, don't buy hype on either side of the extreme. Third, be a lifelong learner. Do not rest just on your credentials alone. I'm not downplaying that people have credentials and that there will be a role for them in the future, but it will not be anywhere close to the center of the future of work or education. They will play a part, but they will not be the centerpiece anymore. And then fourth is get multiple sources of income as soon as humanly possible. So if you're listening to this and you have just one source, but that's an old paradigm. That's industrial age all the way. And even if the second source is only paying one or two of your bills, that's a lot better than having just one. So those are the four things I recommend.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And I'm definitely in the boat of developing multiple streams of income because I've seen myself that relying on just one, not very secure. And even my parents, this wasn't an opportunity for them when they were entering the workforce to have an online business and to create multiple streams of income. And so for them, it seems like, wow, this is a really risky way to go. And I say the other way is actually way more risky, right? Want to talk about, I've chose very early in my business to do it completely online. I don't even like to meet people in person. I personally think it's inefficient, especially for business. Now with these AR and VR tools coming out, I think they're really interesting for entertainment. You see them with Facebook and video games, but Apple's coming out with their new Apple Vision Pro, and I think they're really focusing on productivity. So talk to me a little bit about this, of your opinion. I think the idea of actually going to a place is going to be challenged in the future. In this new AR, VR reality, you'll look perfect all the time. You don't have to leave. It's good for the environment, right? So what are your opinions on this kind of new future of work, integrating VR, AR, and how's that going to maybe change?
Oh, I love this question. I usually get the AI question, which, as I said, is sucking oxygen up, but it needs to be addressed. But this is a great one. It is another one of the trends that I like to talk about, at least in this context especially. My answer is it is a solution that would solve multiple problems. One of my favorite constructs is the challenge response paradigm. You have challenges. What are the responses to said challenges? Rather than amplifying the challenge through using a bullhorn and saying, oh, the world's coming to an end, that kind of stuff, or whether just focusing on the challenge and not offering any solutions or a response that has positivity in it, possibility. Let's shift there. That tends to be where entrepreneurs congregate, but sometimes even entrepreneurs get caught up in this black pill doomsayer thing. As I said earlier, I still have realist tendencies that are crisscrossing through both of the future work and education. So I am with you, Alex. I am about 95 to 98% virtual myself online. I do the occasional once or at most twice a month, I will venture out to something in person because it's either part of the agreement that I have. Like, for example, I have one contract that I purposely signed that does necessitate doing an in-person event. That's okay. I still maintain a co-working membership for those who understand co-working, and I usually go to that once a month or so. That's about it. But when you look at the vast majority of the time, the 95, 97% holds, because inefficiencies are what lead people to say things like this. And this might be mildly controversial, so if it pops your bubble, my apologies, folks, is you don't want to measure your professional life by how busy you are. You want to measure it by how productive you are. What results are you delivering? What value you're producing? We all are going to have times where we get stuck, whether it's through losing a big client and then having to scramble, whether it's a couple clients that are sucking up your time, whether it's technology didn't work that day. It's a part of life. But measure by productivity to be efficient, but also to be effective. That is where AR, VR, metaverse, Web 3.0 transition will come into play. And if you are one of those people that still likes to do handshakes, if you will, to use that terminology, in person, fantastic. I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong. I'm just saying you should be prepared for people like Alex, people like me, who are saying, you know what, I would love to meet with you, but I would love to meet with you virtually. And last but not least, for those out there who are very concerned about taxation levels because we have to do more roads and the roads are falling apart, how about we look at it this way? Why do we need more roads when we can do things decentralized and remote? Yes, we do need to maintain our physical plant. I'm not saying we can ignore it, because hotels, gas stations and such, charging stations are still going to be necessary to some degree. But we don't have to panic about it. We don't have to worry about these bond issues for building these big cathedrals known as schools anymore, because we can do all schooling, all competency-based education, mostly online. You see what I'm saying? Because that's a huge tax burden when you build these big cathedrals known as schools. And then lastly, for those who are very concerned about climate change, I'm not here to take political positions, but what I am saying is we can solve some of these concerns by doing things differently than our parents and grandparents did in the two industrial areas.
Yeah, wow. Well, last thing I want to touch on here, SJ, what does work look like in 10 years? Paint me the picture of that. What industries are going to be really disrupted? What things are going to be fundamentally different? What things are going to go away? And what's our lifestyle going to be like in this new future?
Ooh, that is a question pregnant with possibilities. Lots of possible ways I can answer that. So I'll just give you a couple things that pop to mind. First, we're talking almost the mid-2030s based on that time frame. I see the first thing as the ongoing march towards an independent workforce will continue. The status quo actors, which, just to call them out in a nice way so you know who they are and you can do your best to counteract what they're going to do, because they're going to want to protect their turf, is the conventional academic environment, academia, if you will, big corporations, mega corporations, multinationals, the political class. They are going to be the ones who are going to do everything they can to keep things the way it is. So one thing that will happen in the next 10 years is I believe that those three's impact and thumb on the scale will continue to decrease. Does that mean they're going to go away? No, you're always going to have people in the political class. You're always going to have some sort of institutions of learning, academia, if you will. You're certainly not going to have Amazon.com is probably not going to go away in 10 years, but don't rule it out 100%. So that's the first thing, is their power, their authority will continue to decline. Second, I think more and more people are going to continue to lean into these multiple sources of income, fractionalizing the workforce. The trend of hiring fractionals is a great bridge between the old white-collar industrial and the independent workforce. I also believe that the younger generations, Gen Z right now, Gen Alpha is coming up fast. They're going to continue to say, you know what? I want education on my terms, not on the terms that you're offering me. So this demographic cliff that universities are going to face, I don't think this cliff is going to resolve itself like in the past where there were other dips in population of a certain age range. So I think these universities are going to have to go after folks with micro and nano credentials to say, you know what, you didn't complete a piece of paper, but I'm willing to give you an opportunity to up and reskill so you can have an opportunity to participate in a brighter future. And it's going to be mostly done online. The first wave of this was known as the MOOCs, the massive open online courses. That had its ups and downs, but I think we learned from most of that, and I think they will continue to get better. So that's another thing to keep an eye out for. I also believe that we can, as I mentioned in my answer to your last question, Alex, I think we can solve, at least to some solid degree, some of these societal global challenges that people are rightfully concerned about. Climate, infrastructure falling apart, burdensome taxation, but we're going to have to do it by looking at things very differently. We're going to have to creatively disrupt the same old way that our great-grandparents, grandparents, and parents did it. And we're going to have to say, you know what? We can solve it, but we have to solve it by thinking differently. So that Buckminster Fuller example, better models, make the existing obsolete, should become much more of a commonplace thing instead of being on more of the fringes of the people who are futurists like myself. So those are a handful of things that I will cite. A lot of other things I can bring up, but time always necessitates picking something and not everything.
Well, SJ, I really appreciate you being on the podcast today. You have a business and you help people out. So can you briefly describe that? And then also, how can people connect with you, reach out to you?
Thank you for the opportunity. I brand myself through the business marketplace as the education Sherpa. A Sherpa is a guide. I don't claim I have all the answers for all these future trends. I don't think anyone really does. But I will guide you because I'm tapped into all this stuff and I believe it. And again, I have more possibility thinking, potentiality, growth mindset than some people who are already living in cowering and fear. So as the Sherpa, I offer a market basket of solutions that I will map onto you. I would be love to talk to you. So ways you can reach me. Like any other professional, I'm going to do complimentary consults. I have a booking platform. I will provide that to Alex. You can put it in notes. You can book time. You're not guaranteeing. It's not a requirement that you have to work with me, but you can get to know me and see if I can be of value to you or someone you know. I also have chosen at this stage to focus heavily on LinkedIn. It is a little bit of an older platform, but I adapted to it well. So I am on LinkedIn. I have a business page. I have a profile. You can connect with me, follow me, let me know you heard about me through Alex's podcast. I also do have a landing page on an AI site called Beacons. So that's another way you can reach me and look at some of my past thought leadership. And again, I'm working to make that even more effective because there's so many things I've done. It's about organizing it all in a simpler way. So those are some of the easy, simple ways. And then, of course, I have an email address as well, like most anyone does. So thank you again for the opportunity, Alex. And all this stuff will be provided to you so you can share with your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put SJ's links right below this episode. But SJ, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. We'll have to have you back on soon.
It'll be my pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do 3 things that matter to me. They're in my DNA. serving, solving, and sharing.